Conversations across time, 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 conversations across time.
Good evening and welcome once again to Conversations Across Time. As I'm sure our regular viewers can tell by looking at this set that today is again another tutorial. We have been talking for some time now about the Middle East, and I'm sitting here with the show historian who plays many characters on Conversations Across Time, Mr. Mark Hoffman. Welcome, Mark. I think this is going to be fun.
I hope so. I'm sure it will be.
Because, as you know, we have been talking about the Middle East, and we've been talking about warm water, and we've actually put up maps to try to explain to people exactly what happened in the Middle East in the past and what's going on now. But you make a very interesting point, and for the audience to know, when we were talking in the green room, you suggested that one should never talk about the Middle East without first using the word betrayal in front of Middle East.
Absolutely, because there's been so much betrayal throughout history in the Middle East, and we can work backwards and we can look at it now. I mean, from betraying the Kurds, and that's why we can't, get them to be in a strong alliance with us today, to after World War I, betraying Hussein Ben Ali, which we did a show about, the Balfour Declaration, which seemed to promise the Jews one thing and the Arabs another thing, and how can you promise two groups similar things without betraying one group?
Yes. And
it goes on and on and on. And one of the perceptions we have about the Middle Eastern culture is you can't trust them because supposedly their culture is a culture of betrayal. But the fact is, when they look at us, historically, not only the United States, but Great Britain and France,
they've not been able to trust.
They've been betrayed many times, and they can't trust us. And one of the reasons it's so hard now to get a coalition to fight ISIS and ISIL is because they really don't trust us. They say they'll use us again, and when they
absolutely
fulfill their own goals, they'll abandon us like they had in the past. So
yes.
That's one of the problems we have now in terms of a history of betrayal. And I know, in some of the other shows you did with Dr. Adler.
I want to introduce to you Dr. Herb Adler. And Dr. Adler is a professor in the Department of Psychiatry at Jefferson Medical College, also a clinical professor of family medicine at Jefferson Medical College. I know we're going to be challenged, so please.
Well, you're going to be challenged in a positive way.
Okay.
Because when it comes to trust, we are all experts. We are hardwired. All social animals are hardwired to be experts on trust. Even mice. It's been selected for evolutionarily because to be a social animal, you have to be able to trust the members of your group. For example, a troop of baboons traveling across the savannah. Any one of them can be taken down by a cheetah, a leopard. So they each have to trust that the baboon behind them has their back, literally.
Literally.
Otherwise, the group cannot survive. And so we all have exquisite sensors about whether we can trust somebody, and we don't even figure it out. It's immediate.
The Middle East, of course, is probably the most profound example that one is ever going to see concerning betrayal, because the history has gone back for such a long time, and after the First World War, as you mentioned, the Balfour Declaration made promises to Hussein bin Ali in exchange for for him to use his position with his people to get them to unite and have an Arab revolt. That was to help France and Great Britain and the United States win the First World War. So you can't talk about history and you can't talk about the Middle East without exercising that. I was struck by one of the things that when we talk about betrayal, I was struck by a story that Dr. Adler shared with us.
Some years ago, a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist and getting his PhD in anthropology was studying small religious cults. And I never met this man, but he gave me an accurate description of him. There was a man, let's call him Ephraim. That's not his name, but he took a biblical name. He was a charismatic leader of a small group of zealots. He was paranoid schizophrenic. He had visions. He heard voices, but he was a charismatic leader. And he had convinced his followers that God had appointed him to be his prophet. And my friend, and his followers bought into it. And my friend asked, well, what makes you think that God chose you to be his prophet? He said, well, God showed me his ass. My friend was as amused as we all are, that why would God choose that method to
God even has
delegate
one.
you to be his prophet?
Right.
He said, it's in the Bible. Okay?
Oh.
Took him to a Bible, opened up to a page, the page where Moses is wandering in the wilderness, sees a burning bush, he approaches it, voice comes out and says, I appoint you to be my prophet to take the children of Israel out of Egypt. And of course he says, who are you? And he says, Jehovah, which in Hebrew means I am who I am. So, you know, mind your own business. And then, and this is the critical passage. In the Bible it says, oh, God turned and walked away. And in his concrete way, Ephraim reasoned that God wasn't wearing any clothes. So he says, you're my prophet, and then he mooned him. And my friend and I were amused because it seemed so absurd. But that tantalized me for a couple of days because I knew I was missing something. Because all the people who believed in him were buying refrigerators and renting houses and selling cars. They were not crazy. But they picked up something genuine about Ephraim. And that haunted me for a couple of days. And later that week, I was treating an attorney. And he said to me, going through divorce, he says, you know, you got to cover your ass. And suddenly the light bulb went on. That's what God, that was meant that I trust you. I can be vulnerable with you.
So showing by God showing him his ass meant that God is vulnerable to him?
Exactly.
Yes, and trusted him.
Yes, yes, because trust.
Yes.
You make yourself vulnerable.
Exactly. Means you can be vulnerable with somebody. And without fear.
Which is why betrayal is so hard for people, because they've made themselves vulnerable, right?
Exactly.
I hope you enjoyed the footage as much as we enjoyed that. Babette and I enjoyed our conversation with him.
And by the way, he did a great job in talking to him and everything. It was really great.
And he was so interesting because he explained in just very plain terms the basis of trust and being able to have someone watch your back. I think throughout the animal kingdom, as he explained, it's just been something that happens within the animal kingdom, and we as humans are just a higher, I mean, I know this is going to upset some people, but we're just a higher form of animals. Yes, that's exactly right, especially Republicans. So, that being said, we are looking at right now in this, with what's going on currently in the political scheme of things, we are looking at a I don't know. I don't even know how to describe this. This is a very strange situation, and the Republicans are somehow feeling they're betrayed by.
Well, I think that's part of the appeal that Donald Trump has, and
Yes.
Because they feel betrayed by the Republican Party. They became teabaggers because the
Yes.
Republican establishment promised them certain things, and they got all radicalized by it, and they were betrayed by their leadership. They got nothing. They were promised repeal of Obamacare. Not happening.
happened.
They were promised that they would rescind the agreements on the budget. Not happening.
Mm-hmm.
So they say, hey, we've been betrayed. Now we don't care what happens.
So they don't trust.
They don't trust.
They don't trust.
And Trump plays to that like a concert musician, because he talks about, I'm not taking any money from the establishment. I'm self-funded. You can't trust Rubio. You can't trust because he's a senator. You can't trust Cruz because he's a senator. So you can't. The only person in this world now you can trust is me. I'm behind you. I won't betray you. They will betray you, and it fits right into what Dr. Adler said.
And it fits right into what he said. And remember, I guess a couple years ago, we did a show with an actress playing a good German. Because at that time, one of the real questions I've always had was, how is it that the German people, they weren't all evil. So how did they allow someone like a Hitler to come to power? Do you remember that show?
Yeah, Countess Berchtold did.
Yes.
And that was, in fact, I played Woodrow Wilson on that show.
That's
but
right.
It was really a great show. But the thing is, the things that she articulated about why the Germans fell behind Hitler, even though many of them thought he was a clown and a buffoon, and of course he was flatulent all the time, which we talked about on the show, was because they felt betrayed by the results. In fact, that she says it a lot in the show. She talks about we were betrayed by the Treaty of Versailles. We were made to pay reparations. We were blamed for the war.
Yes.
And Hitler played into all of that. We were not responsible. We were stabbed in the back. You can't trust anybody. The Jews caused it. The communists caused it.
They had to find an other.
Right.
And at this
And
time,
Trump plays into the same thing, and he uses the same propaganda techniques right out of Joseph Goebbels' playbook, who was the propagandist minister for Nazi Germany. Right out of his playbook, he uses the same techniques, especially the nationalism. You know,
yes,
they
we're
kept
going to
yelling,
make
we're going to
America
restore the greater glory of the German Empire. The Third Reich will last for 1,000 years, and Trump goes, "Make America great again."
Make
It's
America
saying the same thing.
Let's
I wish I could speak German the way Hitler said it in German, because he sounds just like Trump in English.
Exactly. Well, the manner, even the method of speaking, even if you don't understand German, if you watch, and it's the same sort of agitated movement that Donald Trump is displaying right now. I'd like us, if we can, I'd like the audience to watch the clip of Countess Berchtold explaining why the German people were so enamored by Adolf Hitler.
Well, the economy was devastated, and Hitler, we were so happy that he did come into our lives because he did improve the economy, and he brought us out of the abyss. And he built roads, and he was able to rebuild the military. Now, my husband was in the military. He was away for a while, and then he finally came back, and we were very pleased because he got his command back. The roads, as I said, were built. Now we had the Autobahn, and we had the people were able to travel. We had new roads, and the factories were being built. And in the factories, the German engineers came into the factories and they built the Volkswagen. The Volkswagen, which was a people's car. Volks meaning people, wagon meaning car. Hitler wanted everyone to have a Volkswagen, to have a car.
Now, may I just interrupt, because what's so
However,
interesting,
we had a Mercedes.
well, you were an aristocrat, and that's what I was going to ask. What was so interesting about that when we talk about the Volkswagen? Because we know in this country, one of the turning points in our history had to do with the Model T Ford, because Henry Ford all of a sudden said everyone should have a car, and a car was for common people. So comparable to the Model T Ford was the Volkswagen, in Germany.
Yes.
So that ordinary Germans had a car. What other things did they have as a result of this madman coming to power? And I recognize he didn't seem like a madman at the time in the beginning. So some of the other depressing things that were happening in Germany after World War I, after President Wilson's treaty, what was the economy like?
The economy was it had collapsed. The mark was 130 million thousand to 1. But he already improved our economy. We were so happy, we were so pleased because of that. And he bought factories. And in the factories, there was war productions. And he was able to, he built bridges, he built roads, he restored the coal mines, and then he put our people back to work. Our people were involved in working now they were employed. 6 million people had been out of work. And these people were now gainfully employed. They began to feel very good about themselves. They had self-esteem. The unemployment was lower, and the economy was now being stimulated. I could see this around me. The people were becoming happier, with their existence.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
It's like if she weren't a German, she could be living today.
Yes, precisely. She could be living today and would probably be someone very supportive of Donald Trump.
For sure.
And
We could call her a Trumpette.
A trumpet. And that explains also because Countess Berthold was an aristocrat. I'm amazed when I hear people say, well, Donald Trump only has an appeal to a certain segment of the people. There are many wealthy people who are lining up behind Donald Trump. In fact, there's one news show that I don't watch this network anymore because I got so sick of the way that they were almost campaigning for Donald Trump. It was a male and a female on a morning talk show on a cable news network. I think that should probably tell folk what I'm talking about. And
it has to do with coffee, right?
It has to do with coffee. There you go. There you go. And one of the things that the male host kept saying was that his brother, who's an intelligent man, is a Trump supporter. And intelligent and well-connected, well-read, and is a Trump supporter. That's very much akin to Countess Berthold. It's very much like what she was saying.
And the thing is, many people, and she articulates it in her speeches, when she's talking about Hitler, they say, well, we thought we could control him. We thought he was the little corporal, and
Yes.
he was uncouth, and he was I think she used the word bourgeois, if I remember. But
Can we splice that in right now? I think it would be good. Let the audience see exactly what Countess Berthold had to say. This is a few years ago.
Yeah, but I think basically, she was talking about we thought we could control him. He was a buffoon. And a lot of people in the beginning thought that about Trump.
Same thing that they're saying. The same thing that so many people were talking about Trump, that he's a buffoon, that we could control him. So if we can just take a break for a minute, let you see Countess Berthold talking about Mr. Hitler.
Even though we felt that Adolf was bourgeois, we thought, we were very, very pleased because he brought our country back to its original glory. And we were pleased with him. Even though he was not built. He was not born in Germany. And he was an Austrian. But he improved our economy. And he brought, as I said, he brought us out of the pits. And things were now improving in Germany, and we were very, very pleased.
Well, she's right on.
Absolutely, she's right on point. Also on that show, if you recall, we had another guest, and that was Mr. Frederick Douglass. Yeah. And one of the things that Frederick Douglass talked about was the fact that the appeal of someone like a Hitler, and what that means and what that says about us. This is a very touching. As we were reviewing that footage, it's very touching for me because Frederick Douglass was played by our dear friend Charles Hammack, and he articulated exactly why a Hitler can come to power and how they can come to power and how dangerous they are. So if we can just break in and show that footage, I think it would be beneficial at this point.
Well, the Communist Party was in competition with other parties, and as a matter of fact, other ethnic groups, to take, I mean, there was a vacuum of power, to take control of the government. And Hitler organized the National Socialist Party as a way to be a buffer to repel the movements of the Communist Party. So it's understandable that the average German person would be more allied in Germany to the National Socialist Party rather than the Communist Party. And that's certainly what applied to the class of the Countess.
But certainly the class of the Countess sort of thought they could keep Hitler as a puppet,
Yes.
and he would protect them from these evil communists.
Yes.
And wouldn't do them any harm.
Yes, their attitude is that Hitler can be discarded, that we can use Hitler and he can be discarded. So what if Hitler is saying that we should have sterilization? We will accept that. So what if Hitler is saying that we should have concentration camps? We will accept that. So what if Hitler is saying that we should kill thousands of children? We will accept that, because after we accept that, we will lift up our heads, and we will get rid of Hitler, and we'll be back in world
And the
power.
whole world thought the same thing.
And the world thought the same
We
thing.
thought that we would be able to manipulate him. He was our puppet. He was under our control. We would be able to manipulate him.
What can we say? That's amazing.
Well, I think that the hope I have is that the audience will look at these things and recognize what can happen if we don't stand up and protest against it. That means, you know, you don't have to get violent, but it means demonstrate. It means get to the polls and vote. I look at the numbers we have in the primaries, and Trump's getting people to vote that nobody, and people forget Hitler was elected, man. And man didn't
That's
just
right.
walk in with guns blazing and take over.
That's
He was
right.
elected in 1933. And then he made an agreement with President Hindenburg, and Hindenburg died, and
Yes.
he fabricated the Reichstag fire, and he took over. And Trump would do the same thing. Trump's an egomaniac like Hitler was. Trump would do that. He already saying, I'm going to change the libel law so I can sue newspapers that criticize me, which does away with the First Amendment. That's the first thing. When we talked about that, when we talked about dictators on various shows, the first thing they do is
Take
censor
control
the press.
of the media.
Right.
Take
That's
control
the
of
first
the
thing
media.
They do.
And that happened. Certainly, that happened in the Soviet Union. That's what in fact another guest that we've had on frequently, John Foster Dulles.
I know that's one of your favorites, Vivienne.
He's one of my favorite people to hate. And I think to myself, I was just in Washington D.C. and I had to fly. I didn't expect to, but I had to fly out of D.C. and I was so upset that I had to fly out of Dulles Airport. That's just how much I dislike John Foster Dulles and what he stood for. But what he and his brother Alan did in the Middle East, back to that, and certainly in Central America.
And they also backed Hitler.
That's right. That's right.
They also
backed
backed the
Hitler.
Nazi businesses in Germany
That's
through
right.
the law firm Sullivan
and Cromwell. Yes.
And I just read something that Richard Nixon interviewed with Sullivan and Cromwell before World War II, and then he was in the Navy, and after the war, before his discharge,
Yes.
nobody knew what he was doing. And this author contends he was doing the bidding of the Dulles boys, destroying all documents that link them
To the Nazis.
to the Nazi businesses. So
Yes.
you have even a betrayal of the American public by people for their own economic gain, or their company's economic gain, and we have a million examples of that. I mean, where's the honor in terms of what doing the right thing when we have secretaries of state, vice presidents advocating policies that foster their business interests rather than the interest of the American people? The Dulles boys, Vice President Cheney with Halliburton, the oil interest of the Bushes. So where does it end? Why did we betray everybody in the Middle East? Why did we stop after the first Gulf War and not take over Iraq. Then we were afraid of destroying the oil. He would burn the oil fields. It would be so. You know, there's betrayal right down the line.
You know,
I'm glad Dr. Adler deals with it.
And he dealt with betrayal. And one of the things that's very interesting, and as you know, this show is produced with a lot of background help and a lot of background research. And our assistant producer said something that was very interesting. And Walter Collins said something that was very interesting. He said, compare the relationship of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, to John Foster Dulles and Dwight Eisenhower. Mm-hmm. Because we know when we did a show featuring President Eisenhower, one of the things that he was very clear to say as a guest on the show was that, well, I was ill when I was in the White House, and I had to rely on John Foster Dulles for a lot of policy. And hopefully, we can pull up that footage and
he became, that's true, because Eisenhower became very, I guess the right word is passive, after he had his heart attack.
Yes. And
pretty much left it to Dulles. And of course Nixon, even though he wasn't officially president, Eisenhower was disabled for a time, yes. So they just ran roughshod, and they instituted many of the policies that Eisenhower, if he were stronger, wouldn't have agreed with. One, yes. the Middle East, but also they started the program to get involved in Vietnam. That they had advocated that before, and when Eisenhower was strong in the beginning, before the French fell, yes. He was totally against it. Dulles and Nixon wanted to nuke.
Yes.
Wanted to use tactical nuclear weapons
in Vietnam.
Yes.
Now that's interesting, because in a previous show, you played Charles de Gaulle, and at that time, one of the things that you stated is, in no uncertain terms, you warned President Eisenhower and the new president-elect Kennedy not to go into Vietnam.
We experienced a defeat in French Indochina in 1954, and I was not president at the time, but we sent our elite troops there, and we were defeated by the native population who wanted their independence. This was a time of nationalistic movements throughout the world. And my advice to the United States at that time, and my advice to the United States now, it's an unwinnable situation. You could have not defeated the indigenous force in Vietnam. You wasted your treasure and your resources and your manpower needlessly, and the United States needed to apply the same type of reasoning now and not make the same mistakes in the current situations throughout the world.
I would beg to differ, Monsieur le Président. I believe that it is the sign of a nation's fortitude to be willing to continue a conflict to the very bitter end, if needs be, to put down and repress a communist upheaval.
And Eisenhower didn't want to, but when he had the heart attack, he laid back. So Dulles and Nixon, that's when we started to put the assistant advisors in and all that, and that's when they instituted the domino theory.
Yes.
And of course Kennedy had a problem, and I don't know if he felt, in terms of his relationship with his dad, he felt he had to be strong and he could never back down, so he could not back off. That's why he went into the Bay of Pigs, and that's why he continued the Vietnam policy. Now some people say, and it's speculation, that if he had lived, we would have gotten out of Vietnam. And, there's all kind of theories
about that, the fact that he was assassinated because when he started talking about getting out of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Listen, I think what we have here is we're just glimpsing at what happens historically and how things repeat themselves. Right now, when you look at what's going on in the world, it shows just how ahead of the curve we've been with exposing these historical treacheries.
I agree, and the thing that scares me the most is, there's an old saying, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Conversations across time, conversations across time. Conversations across time, 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 conversations across time.